Is that how it goes? He's the man that's blind and can jump around. The man without fear that can smell your heartbeat or something like that. You know? Is that it? Is that how it goes?
No, it goes, welcome to the Mobius Couch.
Oh, that's right. Welcome to the Mobius Couch. I'm Joe. Somebody else is here too. His name's Patrick. He's a host.
Hey.
Hey, Betty. What's up, buddy?
So much.
And Alessandro's here too. He's also somebody who is a host.
I'm actually nobody.
I know it. That was just a trick. This is a trick to get you to say that out loud on the recording.
Not any kind of somebody.
And you failed.
I'm the soy boy beta of this group, which is what.
Daredevil, the man without fear who jumps around on roofs. You know, that's how the song goes, right?
Does Britney Spears do the Womanizer song, or is that someone else? Womanizer, woman. Yeah, that's the Daredevil theme. Womanizer, womanizer. Am I right?
He does seem to have a lot of ex-girlfriends that don't treat him well.
A little bit of a
possibly he's the reason, is all I'm saying.
Well, not that that's a major plot point at all. So we're
covering Daredevil, the man without fear. Oh, sorry. Okay. We're doing Daredevil issue. I don't know what volume it is. I guess it's.
I don't mind if you sing as long as it's conveying factual information.
I don't know. Does this have like an overall arc?
Time out.
Why are you timing us out?
Audience, we're talking about Daredevil. So when it comes to Daredevil, there's two seminal creators tied to Daredevil. One of them being Frank Miller, who is a hack and should not have work. He is a mess of a person, probably, because his stories are messes. They're somehow both homoerotic and homophobic. And he's a crazy person, and his stories are insane. But speaking historically, he is closely tied to the Daredevil character. His influence on the Daredevil run, the whole black mask, boxing rap look that they used.
John Romita Jr.? Yeah, that was good shit.
All part of the Frank Miller run. Having said that, Frank Miller's insane. Nobody give him money or read his comics. The next seminal run of Daredevil is what we're talking about today, and that is Brian Michael Bendis, BMB, Brian Michael BMB, and Brian Maleev. It's not Brian Maleev. What's his name? It's Maleev.
Alex
Maleev. So BMB and AM, Alex Maleev. But anyway, Brian and Alex, we're going to talk about the first few issues of that run. Which was huge in modern Daredevil lore and story.
The Bendis run. Talking about the Bendis run, right?
The Bendis run, yeah.
Yeah. And I did want to mention Alex Maleev is not David Mack, who is basically the Frank Miller of art.
And I just want to say, respect the opinion, but the opinions and views expressed by Alessandro
any one of us, Patty, any one of us doesn't necessarily reflect the other two.
Does not represent the Trinity's perspective on artists.
But you could also say that stereotypically Joe and Patty's opinions on things are pretty aligned.
Pretty aligned, usually. I like David Mack. I do have a print of his on my wall of Daredevil from not this run, but the run right before it. And I actually don't think I've read enough Frank Miller stuff to really have an opinion. I just know that he had a really big influence on comics in general, and I kind of just leave it at that. But so I can't really debate you on the Frank Miller stuff. You seem to know a lot about Frank Miller, though, for someone who hates him so much.
You do.
Know your enemy.
I agree with you that David Mack can be at times hard to digest on a page turning by page turning basis. As far as covers go, I love his surrealistic, weird artwork, and I disagree with you. And not always inside the pages am I like, this is horrible. I'm just usually like, this is a lot to follow here.
Look,
and maybe it didn't need to be so crazy.
I'm not arguing that, if you want to frame a cover and put it over your gaming PC in your studio apartment to look cool for, the Tinder dates you bring home, sure, David Mack is good for that. But if I got to read 26 pages on an issue of David Mack art, I'd rather jump off a building.
Okay, so let me ask you another question that is actually really pertinent to what we're talking about here. Neither Frank Miller or David Mack have any part in the issues we're about to discuss.
I agree.
So why the fuck are we talking about them?
I just felt that
we can't talk about Daredevil without talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, well, no. Jokes aside, Frank Miller is a big deal in Daredevil.
Yeah, that makes sense. But the David Mack part doesn't make sense.
One time I went to Dragon Con, my first time, and I dressed up as Iron Fist from the Ed Brubaker run, I think, when they kind of a little off recon of his character. And David Mack saw me and he said, "Awesome costume." And so I'm a little biased because I'll never forget that. Forget that moment.
David Mack's a genuinely nice person. So I also on top of the fact that he's a good artist, unlike Al says. Anyway, we're not talking about him. We're talking about Alex Maleev and Brian Michael Bendis' run on Daredevil that starts with issue 26. They didn't start at number 1 back in the day. I don't remember who was on. I think Joe Quesada maybe, and I don't know who was writing it.
Also, I feel like the numbering did a weird thing where they started at 1 and then they went back, like at a certain point, back to like issue 500 something. So, but this is issue 26. It came out in December of 2001, so it's almost exactly 20 years old.
Do we want to talk about overall thing real quick before we dive in? All right, go ahead.
Still holds up. I loved it, and the art and the story, the pacing, the composition. They use a lot of the silent pauses, the silent panels, very similar to Mr. Miracle, and I do think they use it in a really swell way to tell a fun story and really get a idea of when the characters are deep in thought, and it's also good for comedic beats.
Yeah, there was also that one issue that's basically silent almost the entire issue, or the entire issue. Am I wrong?
It is. Yeah, the entire issue is silent,
which is in strong contrast to his gigantically wordy word bubbles throughout almost every other issue.
Yeah, which
I think is the only thing that doesn't age well. Sorry, Al, I keep cutting you off.
No, I was just going to say the same thing. Bendis is very talky normally in this, but even like Powers, I mean, what he did, I mean, he's written.
I think this is the height of that for him, though.
Yeah, but we did have one issue of just action. I do like the Bendis. I guess he's done this in a lot of stuff, but I noticed it a lot here because of the organized crime component that is big in Daredevil. But he has a lot of sort of very like Tarantino-esque back and forth dialogue, like those two cops in the car when one of them, he's talking about like what would happen if they were to see a superhero. And he keeps saying like, "Oh, I can't, that's not the right example," or like, "That's not the right example." It feels very sort of Tarantino-esque and like that kind of Pulp Fiction, like cheeseburger conversation. Like
I agree. That, and also a lot of the conversations with Silk play that way because he's like telling a dumb story that illustrates his point and they cut him off and ask him questions, but instead of stopping and answering their questions, he just keeps telling the story.
Yeah, he speaks.
You know what I mean? Like a guy from Jersey did this, and they're like, "What guy? When was this? The 50s?" And he just keeps talking as if they hadn't responded to him. I will say this: there is the reason that we chose this story arc, and the reason that like we feel like Bendis and like the whole reason this is like famous is because like this took Daredevil and comic storytelling in general to like a kind of different level where they like outed the secret identity of a character, and it was like a huge thing. I remember very distinctly seeing that issue of Matt Murdock's on the cover with the outline of Daredevil drawn around his face, and it's like, hey, he's on the newspaper or whatever. But I mean, like the deconstruction of the superhero as like a thing and making the other aspects of his life interesting and not just always being about what's going on when they're in costume is, I think, what makes this story so strong and why it still holds up. Because it's a very layered story, which is kind of what we're used to now. But like back in the day, this is kind of groundbreaking for like during its time.
Yeah, this run, not only is Daredevil really interesting, but Matt Murdock is interesting. I love everything to do with him in the different trials, the courtrooms. And the one thing that I don't really remember them referencing it much in TV or movie. And I can understand why, because it's probably hard to do. But I like how they talk about how he can smell different things and how he can know like, oh, this is, where have I smelled this before? Oh, it's a specific woman's perfume. And like, this is what her body odor smelled like. And I remembered this kind of like how a person would remember a face and be like,
Mhm.
I know this specific person was here. So there's a lot of really cool stuff they do with his powers and all that other kind of stuff. You get a lot of good inner monologue things going on with him kind of struggling with his senses almost, because there's times where he's disoriented and it's overwhelming and he can't turn it off,
Yeah.
which is all very cool.
There's a lot of really interest on the powers note. It's like they took what was always there and made it really interesting, as opposed to just being like, let's just he can still jump around and do shit because he has all these cool super senses. They actually like went like, what would you actually do with that? Like you could tell someone was high, you could hear all the heartbeats in the room. Like, you know, you announce something on purpose trying to get a reaction so you could single somebody out, like little stuff like that. I was like, that's really fucking smart. And they just do that left and right in this book like it's nothing. The overanalyzation of that, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, because it's a cool scene because Silk is the new gangster, like initiated into the Kingpin's inner circle, and Daredevil confronts, because the hit is put out on Matt Murdock. I guess should we go issue by issue? Is it getting a little bit
Yeah, I think we're ready. Yeah.
Yeah,
Page 26.
Yeah, let's
Diving in.
The details.
I mean, this series, they open with Kingpin being assassinated Caesar style, so it's fucking kind of crazy. It's another thing you just didn't think could happen in comics. Like, just Kingpin just gets murdered. Like, what the fuck? And granted, he doesn't die, quote unquote. But I mean, like, you know, like it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, and to go back to what we were talking about, the Pulp Fiction influence, because so I guess 2001 is right when Sopranos was coming out too. But I think both Sopranos and this were influenced by Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
That idea of like the I don't know how to describe it, like fallible evil, or like who acts cool, and like you think they're dangerous and they're criminals because they are, but they're also just kind of foolish and human and not really this evil mastermind. And like Tommy Silk kind of ends up being that, because you think like, oh, this guy's got a plan, look at that. But then it just ends up like, no, he's just kind of a dummy who just kind of like overstepped. And there's a lot of that kind of character in The Sopranos and going back to Pulp Fiction, Tarantino stuff. But I think
Silk had a good plan.
Yeah, but it's that idea of like just ridiculous people trying to like be badasses in this ridiculous world of organized crime. But it's really just kind of dummies fumbling about. You get a lot of that in here with characters like Tommy Silk and some of the other low-level mobsters.
And it's funny because Tommy Silk, he does come off as kind of a dum-dum. It's implied he's from a criminal family, so his dad was a mob boss, so he was kind of brought up in this whole organized crime element, but he kind of comes off as a spoiled brat a little bit. He's very cocky.
Yeah, like that stereotypical mafia guy that's getting beat up by his dad who knows better, and he's always fucking up because he thinks he's doing something good. And
right, he clearly fucked something up. I guess I think they say in Chicago or something like that. That's why he's brought to New York. So he's not implied to be a smart guy, which kind of made me laugh, because when Kingpin is being murdered by his entire inner circle, Silk is, what is he quoting? Like something, I think it's Plutarch.
Shakespeare.
I went that because, is it Shakespeare?
Shakespeare, Julius Caesar.
The Shakespeare, yeah. Okay. But it's like, you kind of...
Well, actually, I take that back. I mean, he's talking about Caesar. I actually don't remember if it's specifically Shakespeare, but it's Caesar.
Oh, you know what? I always just assumed it was, and maybe that's my own lack of knowledge.
Well, I didn't know it either, but it's in quotes, so it's obviously a quote from something. But he doesn't seem like a well-read person, right? So you imagine that in preparation for murdering the Kingpin, he went and memorized
a monologue.
Like, dude, you're such a fucking loser.
What a tool. Interesting insight into that scene. Would never have thought of that.
It cuts from Kingpin being murdered by his inner circle to Matt Murdock in the courtroom, and he wins the case. But the thing that happens is he goes outside and a supervillain shows up and causes an explosion, kills some people,
the key is that he yells Matt Murdock's name out before he does it, and then he goes, what? And then like a giant energy explosion pops away from that dude and cars go flying and people go flying.
Yeah, so he's a metahuman. It turns out to be this guy named Nitro, who is, interestingly enough, the same guy who started the whole Civil War storyline back in 2004, I guess. He blows up all those kids, which causes the Superhero Registration Act. The what?
Wasn't it Speedball or some weird name like that?
Speedball is the good guy that's fighting him, and then Nitro.
Okay, and Nitro's the one.
So he basically does what he does in Daredevil, but like at a school, and kills a bunch of kids. So again, interesting, because after Nitro releases his power, Matt, Daredevil, his senses are all fucked up. And it's like, just, you get his inner monologue and it's just like all scrambled thoughts. He can't keep track of anything. It was weird because Foggy was kind of, I always thought he didn't want Matt to be Daredevil. And in this instance, he's like, what are you doing? Put the costume on. You got to go after this guy. And Daredevil's like having an aneurysm on the ground.
I do want to say that.
Yeah, his lack of concern for his friend in this moment is very strange, because the entire rest of this arc, he's like constantly like, you should stop being Daredevil. It's dangerous. And it's a cycle of violence.
No matter the medium, TV, comic, whoever's writing the comic, Foggy is annoying as fuck. Like in any iteration and incarnation of that role, he's just an annoying person who you want.
He's kind of he was sort of like written to be that way, and there's just no good way to get him out from under that.
Which is weird, because it's like there's just something missing that make him likable. Like, he is a concerned friend, and a lot of times he's pragmatic and practical. And as we see in this run, like, Daredevil's mental state deteriorates quickly. And Foggy's kind of a voice of reason, but it's still, he just comes off as too preachy. There's just something about it where he's not. I agree. I had that in my notes as well, because even the writing for the guy that played Foggy on the TV show, he's also still just came off as annoying and angry. And
granted, they modeled that Foggy off of the, you know what I mean? So it's like, where is it starting from? It's a cycle of Foggy violence.
Yeah, I mean, how about we just don't have him be a character?
Yeah, just
get him out of the way.
Matt, the whole point of the end of this story arc is that Matt says something along the lines of, I need to streamline my life. Hey, here's a note. Get rid of fucking Foggy, brother. So back to this, concussion and all, Daredevil chases down Nitro, and they have another quick little fight in the streets, and he's basically beating the crap out of them where the issue ends, saying, who are you and who sent you, kind of thing. His number one concern, again, is that this wasn't an attack on Daredevil. It was an attack on Matt Murdock. So
issue 27, it starts off with these two cops in the cop car. One's clearly a rookie, one's a veteran. The rookie's asking for different perspectives on how they treat different vigilantes and why they arrest supervillains but not superheroes. And Daredevil shows up, and there's a whole weird scene where the rookie cop pulls his gun on Daredevil, and the veteran's like, what the fuck are you doing?
He says, like, follow my lead. I'm serious. Follow my lead, like 3 or 4 times. And then they get out of the car and the rookie's like, hey, freeze. And just shoots like right away. I'm like, what are you, a fucking idiot? Listen to the guy next to you. What's wrong with you?
So the Nitro gets captured, and he's Daredevil's in the hospital visiting Foggy. And he talks about how at least like 3 people died in the explosion. And how there's a reporter or a nurse or someone down the hall that he can hear her heartbeat, and he's like, she's not going to make it. And when he's leaving, and here's another, I think they just do a good job of using those silent beat panels, because Matt, he sees the room that woman's in, and then he sees them pulling the sheet over her
sheet
face.
up over,
and it's like a close-up of his face, and he's clearly walked over to her and pulled the sheet back off, and kind of seeing that, you know, this guy Nitro went after him probably because he's Daredevil. Because he's Daredevil, this woman's dead now. So you get a lot of that in these issues about Matt questioning the good he does as Daredevil, if it outweighs the collateral damage of that.
Yeah, he feels responsible for that woman's death, even though it wasn't his fault, sort of, so to speak. And then he confronts Kingpin, which is also badass.
The whole relationship between Daredevil and Kingpin's wife, Vanessa Fisk, they do it so well through this entire run, not just this story arc, but just like through the entire run. They play this weird, they're allies. Sometimes their interests align, sometimes they're diametrically opposed. it's less of a physical battle between them. It's more of a battle of wills and wits. They do a very good job of that throughout this entire run.
Yeah, they set up this sort of strange like symbiosis between them where I think Fisk even mentions, the devil is better than the one you don't. So they set up this relationship where the two of them, even though they're opposed, are almost sort of more comfortable fighting each other rather than taking the other person out so that who knows who might take that.
I agree with you on Kingpin's side. I don't think that's where Daredevil's head's at. I think it's more of a he knows it won't stick kind of thing. Like he can't do anything, and he probably frustrates him and makes him feel powerless. But I mean, like he can't murder him because he won't. And then what's he gonna do? Walk into his high rise every month and beat the crap out of him for no reason? Like he knows he's doing bad things, but he can't prove anything.
Yeah, later in the arc, he does beat the shit out of Kingpin, and
yeah, but he also just talks to him sometimes and goes, "What the fuck's going on?" Like, kind of thing. Because like, there's no reason to do like, you know what I mean? I guess my point is, he knows he can't take him in to jail because nothing will happen. Like, he'll just be back out on the street and everything will be the same. So it's more about like the long game with Daredevil, where he's like, I need to find something that will take him down eventually, but I can't just bring him to jail every 5 minutes or he'll just be right back out. Kind of thing. And with Kingpin, I feel like it's more of like the devil and I don't want to get rid of him because then it'll just be Spider-Man I'm fucking with, and I don't know who Spider-Man is. So if he ever needs to play that trump card, he can because he knows. But if he doesn't know who the person is, then it's like, could jeopardize him.
I'm going to disagree. I mean, I think Bendis is kind of pointing to a level of familiarity and comfort on Daredevil's side as well, of kind of matching wits with this opposing chess master and being comfortable.
Sure. I mean, I think it's a part of it, sure. But I think like ultimately if Daredevil thought he could take him in and it would send him to prison, he would do it. He wouldn't just not do it because it's comfortable fighting the Kingpin. He would do it.
I mean,
that's all I'm saying.
I think you're both right. So I think Kingpin, if the viewers don't know, at this point in time, Kingpin knows that Daredevil is Matt Murdock. So he knows his secret identity, but Kingpin chooses to keep it a secret, doesn't make it public. And I think he does that so he has a little bit of control over Daredevil. Daredevil, I think he views Kingpin, obviously he hates everything the guy stands for, but at the same time, Kingpin does have a sense of ethics and morals that I think Daredevil understands. And there's certain things, because even in this, there's a hit put out on Matt Murdock, and Daredevil's first inclination is like, it wouldn't be the Kingpin because that's just not his style. He wouldn't.
Yeah.
That there's no real honor.
He's weirdly honorable in a fucked up way.
So I think there is that aspect between the relationship where, I mean, I hesitate to call it that Daredevil has a respect for Kingpin, but there is that kind of understanding. And then, Matt is an attorney. And so he knows Kingpin is like this ridiculously smart, well-connected, insanely wealthy person. So
that said, he is the first person he confronts over it, though. He's like, what was that explosion? And he's like, what explosion? And he's like, God damn it, he calmed down right then. Because he's listening to his heartbeat kind of thing. But, I mean, there is a healthy respect, and they do have this weird dichotomy, but he still goes after him right away, thinking it was him. Or he's at the top of his suspect list.
I think it's because he's convinced by I don't know if it's Ben Urich or what, but I think Urich is like, someone tells him that maybe Kingpin, because also I don't know how this happened, but Kingpin is blind now, so he's handicapped. So he's kind of in a weakened state.
Must have been the preceding story or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it was Foggy. I don't remember how he got blinded either because I didn't read any of that.
So someone convinced Daredevil that he might be putting a hit out on Daredevil because he's trying to reassert that he's this strong kind of mafia guy now that he's got this clear disability. He doesn't want anyone coming after him.
Right.
So I think that's why Daredevil goes to confront him in the first place, but he kind of already knew the answer before he got there.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of time jumping around in these issues, so it'll be like 3 months ago, and then it'll show like Silk just arriving in Kingpin's crew, so to speak, and then other shit like that. But on that note, we jump back in time to Silk arriving at his crew, and we see basically he has a conversation with Wilson Fisk's Kingpin's son, And he's just like, what the fuck's wrong with that guy? Or they're sitting at a poker table and he's like, holy shit, is that Richard Fisk or that Richie? And he's like, hey, Richie. And he's like, fuck off. And he's like, what the hell is wrong with that guy? But you get this, it's seeding this story of like Richie being like this shitty son that's been shit on so many times he just can't deal with it anymore and drinks every day and just doesn't give a fuck anymore. You know what I mean? Instead of being like his dad's right-hand man and being like his, second in command, so to speak, he's just this like random sad sack that hangs out with the rest of the capos.
We'll talk about it later, but I mean, yeah, I think he is kind of just a byproduct of years of probably just childhood abuse, and he just his spirit was probably broken when he was like 6 years old, and
probably
he does look like he's about 70 years old at the bar, but he must not be that old because I can't imagine Kingpin's more than like 50. But the way they draw him, he just looks so haggard, like he's just been using drugs for the last 20 years.
I mean, he is the soy boy beta cuck.
1000%.
He is the platonic form of a soy boy beta. That's it.
Boy beta.
The real quick before we move on to issue 28, they talk about, it cuts to Ben Urich and he finds out Kingpin's dead and he goes running out of the Daily Bugle where he works. Is he just looking at porn on his computer? What's going on here? Do you see this?
Yeah, there's X. For some reason, it just made me think of like Jean Grey. Or there's X's.
Is there an X-Men costume that just had giant areola X's over one of their boobs back in that time period?
I mean, maybe Jean was trying to show up Emma. You know what I mean? She saw that wandering eye with Scott, and she was like, "I got to step up my game."
I mean,
it's just like, what's going on?
Like red hair and then X over.
What do you mean looks like red hair? It's black and white.
No, there's a red tint to that.
There's a tiny bit of
There's
color.
A red tint and then X's over the nipples.
Maybe it's are you looking at it digitally? Because I'm not, so maybe it looks crisper there.
Yeah, I've got it digitally.
Oh, I meant to say that earlier. I read this digitally, and even though it was done 20 years ago, reads remarkably well on the like zoomed in digital panels. It really makes those silent beeps pop much better. And I was kind of shocked how well what is it called, like magnified zooming, or I don't know,
when it just zooms in. Are you reading it like panel by panel, or it's just the panel?
It zooms in on certain pieces of dialogue. It almost allows me to kind of focus on the art more and more on the different beats. There's some panels where when you would flip from panel to panel, it almost seemed like it was animated the way they'd drawn it.
Yeah, he does. I mean, all right, what's on Alex Maleev's art, I simultaneously love it and don't love it at the same time. Like, he takes a lot of shortcuts by doing like photoshopped backgrounds and just like, adding a bunch of scribble and like kind of thing, like it's not like he's drawing these buildings, is my point. They're like pictures that he's like doctoring to fill his backgrounds up, and then he's drawing the characters. But I mean, at the same time, good job. It looks amazing, so I'm gonna
I think it's an interesting perspective, because I think for you as an artist, you're much more visual, and when I'm reading, I'm kind of really focused on the story and I'm focusing on the characters, but I'm not really paying attention too much to the background. So I really love it.
Fair enough.
I love everything.
I mean, I do too. Don't get me wrong. I like what this is. His artwork is what drew me to this Daredevil run in the first fucking place. Like that one cover, I think it's 30, where he's pulling the mask over his eyes and the eye holes are stretched out. Fucking beautiful. Anyway, and just the dark noirness of how he draws them.
Yeah, I love Maleev's. I mean, in contrast to what I was talking about David Mack, I love the kind of like sketch-like, but still realism that he does.
He adds a lot of grit, and it's realistic, but it's also, that being said, the Spider-Man panels in this, not that great. Like, he's okay with drawing like slightly more grounded Daredevil, like just jumping onto a truck and then jumping onto a building, like, but with the really animated Spider-Man flipping around doesn't look as good, I guess. Other than that, everything.
I mean, the only criticism is like color-wise, it is very kind of early 2000s gray, that kind of
like it, a really muted palette,
gray, gritty sort of look. I mean, I'll give you.
I think the main reason they do that is so Daredevil pops when all the red is on. Which
but it's
great.
still,
Again, fine decision.
Much. Yeah, it's a little much, I guess. But
well, for instance, overall it's fantastic. In issue 28, for instance, the first panel is like a giant scene, like 2/3 of the page with the train tracks, and like, he didn't draw all that shit. It's just a picture of train tracks that he doctored up to make it match his artwork, which again, totally fine. And I don't disagree, but I just go like, all right, like Brian Hitch would draw that shit, which is insane and probably a waste of your time because you can just do this and it looks good.
Well, if I could make another side note, what we're seeing here is the back side of the Silver Cup Studios sign in Queens, which was the studio where Sopranos filmed.
Interesting. A little homage to what
I don't know. I don't know if this came out after Sopranos started. I mean, it's a famous studio in Queens.
Another thing that probably took him all of 30 seconds, but in the next panel is literally Nelson and Murdoch's attorney at law, like little metal plaque sign, and there's buildings in it and they're kind of warping. And that would take 2 seconds to do in Photoshop and take an eternity for someone to actually draw. So that's probably why he was able to draw every issue of this comic book and move on with his life. And I, thank you for that. I mean, again, not a knock on Alex Maleev. I really like his artwork.
Well, so I think we're at the issue now that this issue, they purposefully made it no dialogue. It's all just art and action.
So again, if I could be incorrect on this, but I'm pretty sure that Marvel did this thing called Nuff Said at this point in time. And it wasn't a conscious decision by Bendis to not put words into this issue because he's so wordy and talky. It was every comic that month had no words in it. Oh, and I could be wrong. This might not be that issue. I don't know. But I'm pretty sure it was like a blanket-wide company thing.
It's interesting because there is that issue of the new X-Men run with Morrison where Emma and Jean go inside Professor X's brain and there's no talking. It's one of my favorite.
Yeah, that's same thing. Yeah,
it probably would have been around the same time. I think that was like 2001.
Yeah, it must have been the same time.
I think that's what this is, which again, sorry for giving Bendis credit where it wasn't due, but I don't think that was a conscious decision on his part. Yeah, there is a lot of silent panels within the story.
No, I find it easier to believe that some editor just told Bendis, like, we're doing this thing this month, you can't write.
Also, this issue is almost written in a way where it's like Bendis wrote a normal issue and then just didn't put the words in. Like there's scenes where he's literally like opening his mouth and yelling at people that he's beating up, like talking, like, and they just don't have words. It's not like it's written in, which by the way, if I'm not mistaken, and I could be wrong in my history here, but there was a random issue of G.I. Joe comics that was published by Marvel that accidentally went out with no words. So it was as if people were talking, but there was no word bubbles in the whole issue. And I think they kind of made it like a thing. And I'm pretty sure that's where all this came from. But I could be wrong. But at the same time, so maybe he was purposely doing it that way. Like he just wanted it, like instead of making a silent issue where there was no words in the story, he literally made it an issue where it looked like they were talking, but no word bubbles were there.
To get back to the issue, so this wordless issue is pretty much Elektra sends a note to Daredevil saying, hey, Matt Murdock, there's a hit on him for, first of all, let's talk about inflation. $500,000. You'd think more, right?
I thought the same thing. I was like, that's not that much.
You'd think it'd be like 3 million or something to kill, but anyway.
I mean, I don't know. $500,000 is a lot.
Well, but you got to pay taxes on that.
No, they don't. They're criminals, Al.
I guess they don't.
You pay taxes. You got to do a 1099 on that.
I guess the guys that are going out on the hit just think it's a regular lawyer. So I guess that's a lot of money for just that. But I guess if they obviously
that's true.
Daredevil, they'd be like,
I don't know. Nitro even said the words. They said Daredevil might show up or something like that. So like they have a little information.
Yeah,
that it's going to be a little harder than just.
Somebody told me like murder this person. Oh, and Daredevil might show up. I wouldn't do it for $500K. That's all. I need 3 or 4 million.
Devil of Hell's Kitchen.
So I do because I'm kind of obsessed with Elektra in a weird way. I do love how obsessed they show us that Matt is over her, because when he finds the letter from her, there's like a panel where it looks like he's like literally making out with that
strokes it with his hand.
Yeah, he's like molesting the shit out of it.
That's how he reads, you idiots.
But he can smell like from 3 rooms over. He is up in that. Like it's a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, Patrick, I was indulging you. He's clearly reading like the shape of the letters to read the letter.
This one, when he's like got his whole.
Okay, no, yeah, well, all right. That one he's.
Wait, which one? Wait, which panel is that?
There's the second panel after he finds the letter. He has it like his nose is in it.
Yeah, that one.
Oh, yeah. Okay, sorry, my bad. I was past that already.
It's like sniffing panties or something. He's putting that.
Yeah, I just took that as he was deeply smelling it to see if it was what he thought it was. But you're right, it's creepy, and you're right. He probably could smell that from 100 miles away.
Later in the issue, he knows Vanessa Fisk was in that room like hours earlier because of her perfume. Like he didn't need to get that close to the letter to know it was.
Well, maybe Elektra doesn't have a lot of scent coming off of her.
True, she is very mysterious.
I mean, she's dead, so maybe the dead smell less.
Maybe she's earthy and doesn't wear perfume, and it's just he had to get really in close to smell her musk.
Perhaps.
But right, and so the rest of the issue, he kind of runs this gauntlet of killing would-be assassins, including Captain.
Killing? No.
He doesn't.
Beating.
He beats the shit out of them.
Yeah. Is there a Captain Boomerang in Marvel?
I honestly think these characters, and I could be wrong. I didn't take the time to really think about it because I thought they were just created. They were just random villains created for this issue. And Shotgun, who is the guy who tries to shoot him, very reminiscent of Deadshot. Boomerang, very reminiscent of Captain Boomerang. I feel like it was one of those things that they always do where they kind of steal an archetype of a character from DC and bring them to Marvel, or Marvel brings one to DC, vice versa. So, I mean, I think it clearly is based on Captain Boomerang, but I think his name is just Boomerang.
Yeah, for some reason, Havoc is wearing a weird Amish hat and just hanging out in the street.
What was that all about? That's Bullseye, right?
Yeah, it's Bullseye.
But what the fuck is he doing?
Why is Scott Summers' brother hanging out in the street?
But was he there?
I think he got the information that the hit was on. I honestly feel like maybe
I thought it was
there to make sure no one else kills him.
Does Bullseye figure out in that moment that Matt Murdock is Daredevil?
Doesn't he already know?
I do like how the entire running, like this entire story arc, Daredevil's like, how could my secret identity have gotten out there? And everyone he says it to is like, well, this person knows.
Foggy. I like that one part where he's like, thank you for not saying how I failed, and everyone knows, and it's obvious, and there's a million ways. And he's like, you're welcome. Yeah, I don't know. Bullseye obviously either he's figuring it out and he's biding his time, or he already knows and he's there to literally because he's that crazy. Make sure no one else kills Daredevil but him. Who knows? He's probably doing the exact same thing Daredevil's doing right now.
Well, what would your reaction be if you were in a crowded New York and you saw a dude with a Bullseye costume, like a wide brim hat on,
with a hat on over it, like it's not hidden at all?
What would you think? I mean, that'd be kind of strange, right? What would you think?
Their eyes are all on Daredevil, dude. No one's paying attention to him.
I don't know. It still kind of sticks out in a crowd that like this.
Oh my god, it does. It's ridiculous. I really do like that Daredevil's so attuned to that guy being anywhere near him that he immediately, like, even though he's fighting, he stops and just looks like straight through the crowd to right where he was, like two seconds beforehand, kind of thing, and then kind of runs into the crowd just to find him.
And Bullseye has something in his pocket. Like, I think it's the photo of Matt Murdock.
Yeah, it's the hit order. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if he knew who he was or not, but I feel like he definitely figured it out in this issue if he didn't already know.
Yeah, maybe. That's fucking. If this is the issue where Bullseye finds out who Daredevil is, that's pretty fucking stupid that we don't know that. Granted, we're not like, again, we kind of said this going in, we're not like deep cut Daredevil fans. Like, I kind of started on Daredevil with this. Like, I read a little bit when I was younger and stuff, but this is the run that it made me go like, what the fuck is this? I want to read this. And then the more you read, you're like, holy shit, this is amazing.
Yeah, anyway. I mean, I came to this one later. I started in on I don't know if it was the immediately next or like 2 writers after Bendis, but the Brubacher run with like the world tour and that part is when I started.
Yeah.
which was also.
I've read a bit of that. I don't know if I read all of it, but I read a lot of it.
It was a lot like, I mean, it was good. It sort of picked up.
It followed on this as well as you can.
Really good, yeah.
All right, so issue 29, right? We're there?
Vanessa Fisk, Mrs. Fisk. Not a soy boy, by the way.
No, Vanessa is a total badass.
She's a fantastic character in this. I mean, let's we could probably do you pass the Bechdel test right now, but I mean, like, because it doesn't. But
okay, well, wait a minute.
Vanessa, really strongly written.
All right, well, time out. So first of all, it's time for everybody's favorite segment.
Oh, it is?
Pass the Bechdel.
Bechdel.
That's the Bechdel test. I want to preface, I don't know how to say this politely to BMB. We've done a lot of early 2000s comics, so I think you can imagine we've done a lot of runs that have failed the Bechdel test. However, even within that group, I feel like this run is somehow even more offensively doesn't reach the Bechdel standard. I mean, the only women we get are like Natasha shows up just to be in a cat suit and look hot, and then Elektra's half naked in 2 scenes, and those are pretty much the only women in this other than Vanessa Fisk.
To be fair, it's not like Bendis invented their costumes.
There's this really, you know what?
Natasha stripping down and being like in a cat suit and then being like, put on your suit, let's go. That one I give you, but Elektra standing there and talking to him on a rooftop and just calmly sitting there and standing, that's just how she looks.
The main point is these women have no real role or character or purpose of this. And
except for Vanessa.
But it's still not the Bechdel test. There's not 2 women in a room talking about not a man. So this fails.
Patrick has a point to say, and it is.
Here we go.
But does it pass the Makamori test?
No.
I think so.
Vanessa's character does not change or grow in any way whatsoever throughout this arc.
She murders her son.
She murders her own son.
But she's the same person she was in issue 29.
I disagree. I think that was a huge change in who she was.
Okay. Well, when we get there, let's bring this back.
She was always her son's protector and protecting him like his whole life. And then this attack on her husband changed how she looked at him.
But changing how you look at a person isn't a fundamental change in who you are as a character growth or anything like that.
I think her crossing that boundary into someone that would murder her own son is changing who you are fundamentally. If you were previously someone who would not murder your own son, no matter what he did, because this wasn't the first time he tried to kill Fisk.
In issue 29, she was still someone who would murder her son.
I don't know, though, because they do a very good job, again, with the composition. When Vanessa finds out Kingpin is almost dead, it's 4 panels.
And she's in shock.
She's in
and the
shock.
Background just changes.
Yeah, so it shows her traveling from where she's at back to New York City. She's in shock. Again, as Joe said, we're not deep cut Daredevil fans prior to this run. So I don't really know what Vanessa's role is prior to this. I'm sure she probably engaged in some criminal activity.
Not the Kingpin of the city, though. And she becomes that.
Had to, because Kingpin was there. And so this is a scenario where...
So she grows and changes into that character.
But again, everything she does, it isn't her own agency. It's in the service of saving Kingpin and putting him on an IV so that he'll then revive and be Kingpin again. Nothing she does was for herself.
It's okay, so maybe I'm disagreeing with you because I know what comes next. And I think the overarching story arc of what Bendis did with her character from this point to the end of his run passes that test. I think this is just the first tiny step of that. And yeah, you're right. Maybe within this arc, it doesn't really... But I think this is a huge step in that direction. But unless you know where that direction is going, I can understand you being like, no, this is bullshit. But so I guess let's put a pin in that, maybe?
Sure. Okay, we'll put a pin in it. But
put a pin in Vanessa, but otherwise, you're right.
All right. But
Bendis, you're toxic. Sorry.
Bendis is toxic. It's bullshit. Bendis, educate yourself. Represent women better in your writing.
And maybe he does currently. And I think he does.
Yeah, and that's the end of everybody's favorite segment.
Do you pass the Bechdel test? Test. Bechdel. That's how it goes, right?
Okay, we got to do the whole jingle, but all right. Anyway, it's done.
So I will say, again, not too familiar with Daredevil prior to this arc, but this dude is just full of fucking anger and rage, and that is a constant throughout Bendis's entire run, and it's quite terrifying. I get why Boomerang was petrified of Daredevil running away from him in the last issue, because he's a terrifying man. And then
he's horrifying.
We have another flashback when Daredevil confronts Kingpin, thinking that Kingpin put the hit out on Matt Murdock. Kingpin's blind, so Kingpin realizes that one of his people must have put this hit out, which is implying that there's a coup that's going to happen to Kingpin. Kingpin's blind, and you kind of feel sorry for him for 2 seconds, because he's like, maybe we should help each other. And Daredevil has already dipped out and just left Kingpin to pretty much. There are some.
So does this issue end with that blind conversation? No, not quite. Okay.
I think so.
It basically does. It ends with Vanessa asking Kingpin's little fix-it guy, Dini, which I assume is named after Paul Dini. He goes, these men who did this, these men, was my son among them? And he's like, Vanessa, and she's like, was he? And he's like, shit. So I think like that was kind of like an integral moment in her character arc.
Yeah,
where she discovers that her son was responsible for almost murdering her husband.
She's the same person she was at page 20 as she is at page 100.
Agree to disagree, Al.
So next issue begins with, I really enjoyed this. It begins with Daredevil and Ben Urich talking, exchanging information. And I guess Ben is a smoker, and there's this little gag with Daredevil keeps ripping the cigarettes out of his mouth.
Yeah.
Also,
well, the smell of the cigarette really fucks up with his super senses. Yeah. But two, he's just like, I actually care about you, and I don't want you to die. There's just like this little bit of like,
it was a fun
kind of adorable on like a friendly level, but at the same time, he's like, stop fucking smoking around me. It drives me crazy.
It was perfect. It was perfect.
Yeah.
It does kind of show that they're friends, and he's like, you need to quit smoking.
Yeah, they're discussing Kingpin being dead, or if he's actually dead or not.
Right. It was pretty cool because it goes into the fact that Daredevil's trying to figure out who put the hit out on him, and Ben Urich is able to figure it out within like 2 seconds, which,
yeah.
And I had no real concept of who this character was prior to this run, and immediately they make him this very cool, very chill, very smart reporter that knows stuff that not even Daredevil knows. They also kind of draw him, and I'm sure this is coincidence, but he reminds me of Bob Odenkirk, which the way they draw him makes him seem even more cool than I thought he was the first time I read it.
He also has a cool exchange with Jameson about
I agree.
Integrity and what they're trying to do with the Bugle and stuff. I mean, he's a good character in this.
I think that Alex Maleev definitely like quote unquote casts his characters after real people, but he draws them enough differently where it doesn't feel like, it's not like Sam Jackson in the Ultimates. You know what I mean? Like it looks like a human, and they look separate from the guy next to them because they're kind of modeled after real people, but you don't quite know exactly who he's modeled after. So it's very possible he does kind of remind me of Odenkirk. Could be.
A big part of this issue is Silk, who is the newest recruit in the Kingpin's gang. So he's found out that Matt Murdock is Daredevil. Kingpin's been sitting with this info and has not shared it. So he's like staging this coup within the inner circle. And I will say Silk's pitch like is appealing. He's kind of like a Bernie Sanders of the underworld, saying that he's going to give these huge cuts to his men. And he's like, why do I need a big ivory tower? Like, I'm happy with where I'm at.
He's like, yeah, I've got a big house. I've got a wife. I've got a mistress. Like, I don't need $700,000 a year from each of you to live in a giant tower. Like,
right.
Just keep your money. Like, we can all do this, but without him, and have a way more money for each other, you know, kind of thing. I also, the deconstruction of like the superhero aspect of it too, like just the, like, why the fuck are we paying these assholes with dumb tights and capes on, running around blowing shit up? Like, let's just shoot a guy. We'll be done with it. Like, why are we doing all this? You know, like kind of thing. I like that aspect of it too. Some of it, the one aspect I do want to talk about this issue is one of the things that Silk is able to do is to like worm his way into like the good graces of all of Kingpin's capos, which should be like super fucking loyal to him. They just all that one double page spread of them all having like recollections of him just like Kingpin just like practically murdering them all, but for some reason not. And like there's a lot of zooms in on Kingpin's face and it's all scratchy and crazy and red, and like he's holding his boot on someone's neck and like pushing somebody off the side of a high-rise building, but he doesn't kill them, obviously. And it's just like they're all terrified of him, and he somehow senses that and just goes like, the only reason you guys don't want to do this is because you're all scared of him. And it's just like he does a good job of getting into their heads, you know.
But you also, I mean, you kind of get a feeling for the idea that Tommy's maybe full of shit just by the fact that like all-time beta loser Richard Fisk is kind of manipulating him.
Yeah.
Killing his father for him. And so you're already kind of like, all right, well, if this beta loser's working you might be.
Also, he memorized a monologue.
And it probably wasn't Shakespeare. We're not sure what monologue that is, but
I don't think, honestly, in retrospect, probably not Shakespeare.
Yeah, it's probably some stupid other monologue.
I do like the idea. So there is Wilson Fisk, Kingpin, his son is a big loser, as we mentioned. There is this theory, and it would be interesting if it was real, that Silk says to the cops after he's been arrested that Kingpin's son was the real mastermind. And it would be interesting if because he sits at the bar every night at Kingpin's like air and just drunkenly tells secrets to like apparently he's been stirring shit up for like years, waiting for someone like Silk to come in who has enough charisma to kind of coalesce all of these people around him to take down his dad.
Yeah, but I mean, Richard says that in the issue specifically. Because, like, I think Tommy says something like, well, why haven't you done anything? And he says,
and he's like, they won't listen. He's like, I've tried. They won't listen to me anymore. As in, they've tried it before, or he has specifically. I don't think he's gotten everyone on board with him before, but he's tried to overthrow his father before, and it never works. And that's why he's in the state that he's in.
Well, it's just interesting because, I mean, his mother pretty much tells him he's a failure, etc. But that was a pretty smart plan overall. I mean, you did almost you missed the mark, but you did almost kill the fucking Kingpin by just being a conniving little shit sitting at the bar.
Yeah, except that his own mother cucks him out of his crime empire, so he's a loser.
She is a stone cold bitch.
Or she wanted nothing to do with this and then decides to step in. It's a crazy turn in her character arc.
Okay. Let's move on.
Issue 31.
Issue 31. Let's see here.
So this cover starts the covers that I started seeing in the comic shop going like, what the fuck is Daredevil looking so fucking cool for? And should I be reading this storyline? Because I remember going like, this looks amazing.
He's got sort of like a Trigon look going with like multiple red eyes. Red eyes.
That's sort of, yeah.
Well, I think those are the tips of his horns.
Well, I know that.
Oh, you know what? The one thing I will say is like there's about Maleev's art, there's a few scenes, and he doesn't do it often, but like there's a couple panels where they get like really lazy with the emblem and they just like, it's like they literally just type DD on a typewriter and like photoshopped it onto his chest or something instead of him drawing it. It's not in this cover or anything. It's later on. I'll point it out when it comes around. But the point is like, it's just one of those things like you can't draw. Like, it's like not drawing the bat symbol and then just like taking that generic bat symbol and like sticking it on Batman's chest, like in the middle of an image. Like
you got to deliver 24 pages every month. What do you want?
You can't draw a DD on his chest.
Why don't you try drawing?
And they don't look the same.
All right, you try drawing Daredevil for Marvel every month. And then
you know what I would do if I was drawing Daredevil every month? Never not draw the symbol on his fucking chest. Anyway, issue 31.
Issue 31, Ben Urich and Daredevil talk about who put the hit out. They figured out Daredevil goes to confront this guy who's a broker. He pretty much has, C-list metahuman villains on call to help with these hits. And so Daredevil shows up and the broker's already dead. And this is where you get a good example of him using his sense of smell because he smells patchouli oil and mink. He goes mink and patchouli oil, and he knows from just those 2 cents that it's Vanessa Fisk, so he figures that out pretty quickly. My favorite thing, though, with all the people Vanessa kills, is they always reference 22 caliber, a girl's gun.
Yeah.
Like, what is a girl's gun? And
it's just a smaller caliber pistol that doesn't have a lot of kick. So stereotypically, men don't typically wield that weapon. It's not a lot of stopping power.
I don't think it's really, I mean, it's just a device.
It's just funny that they keep honing in on it, though.
Yeah, but it's just like a device by which other people can understand that she did it.
Well, but I mean, Daredevil figures it out immediately, but the cops, when they're talking about it, there's like, it's 22 caliber, a girl's gun. A woman did this, and it's like, well, men can also use that gun. It's just weird that they automatically.
If anything, based on that stereotype, I would carry that gun just so they'd always think it was a girl. It's just like, I got away with another murder. They thought it was a woman. Those fucking idiot cops.
I'm going to disagree on this too. Have you ever tried firing a 22, Patrick? On your giant man hands, you wouldn't even be able to handle a gun that.
Yeah, your finger wouldn't even fit through the little guard.
You guys, I hate to tell you this, but I have tiny baby hands like the former guy. Sucks, but it is what it is. So I could definitely shoot that gun.
All right. Well, I just mean,
Patty, there's no way in hell you could ever convince me you have tiny baby hands.
A standard red, white, and blue-blooded American male wouldn't be able to shoot a feminine 22. That's all I'm saying right
now. My only point is they make
look at Al's man hands.
They make the reference that it's a girl's gun, and they just automatically assume a woman did it because of that, and it's just kind of like, it's just fucking funny.
It's very funny. The constant callback to it is kind of funny. They'd say it like 3 times in a row, and you're like, we got it, Bendis. Only girls use 22s. We got it.
So also, Bendis showed us Vanessa doing it, so it's like we don't need added hints that she did it.
And
that's true.
This issue ends with Vanessa waiting for her son to show up at his apartment, and it's very sad because he thinks that his mom's going to be happy because he thinks she also sees the Kingpin as this monster that he has slayed, and that is not the reaction he gets.
Here's why. Because in the past, that's who she was as a character. And currently, she is started and begun on an arc that is very different from who she once was.
Can we move on from this? I don't agree with you. I don't get what you're talking about.
I think I've
only read these 8 issues, and she's the same person in all these.
It's 11 issues, and I'm going to keep hammering you home because when we finally return to Daredevil at some point in time, I'll be like, "You're wrong."
I think we can bridge your 2 ideas together because there is a scene later in this story run where Matt Murdock has dinner with Vanessa, and he says he's sorry to hear about the loss of her son. And he says, I hear it's the worst grief a parent can feel, like losing a child before they die. And there's an awkward beat panel where she just looks at him. And I think the idea they're implying is that because Kingpin has always existed, she has never had to get her hands dirty. And now that he's gone, it's not that she's basically growing as a character. It's just she's kind of showing her true colors now because she fucking has to. Like, she can't be the protective doting mom anymore. Like, your son fucked up, you gotta kill him. She was always probably capable of all this, and maybe the fact that Kingpin's out of the picture, she's kind of I think I've had too many hits off this vape.
Hashtag Blaze Life.
So I think we're all talking about the same thing, but in just different ways.
The montage of the capos getting murdered is fucking awesome. It's just a 2-page spread of like different ways mafia douchebags get murdered, and it's fucking great. One guy's just pitched off the side of a building, love it. The other one's getting murdered by some hookers. Yeah, the other one's just sitting on the toilet with a newspaper, Kingpin dead ? And he's just got bullet holes in him. It's fantastic. There's an ice pick in someone's head.
And this is this goes back to like The Godfather. I think originally did the mob hit montage of different people dying different ways. So this is a tried and true organized crime fiction thing.
It's drawn well and laid out well on a double page spread, though. That's all I'm saying. But then we get Silk gets attacked.
Yep, Silk gets attacked. He escapes and he
runs to the police. Yeah.
He runs to the police, turns himself
like a little baby,
I gotta say, I respect that. Like, he didn't spend 2 seconds thinking about it. He's just like, and right to the police. Like,
well, he didn't go right to the police. He ran to a phone booth, called his daddy, and then his daddy wouldn't let him come home.
But then, like, right to the FBI and is like, "What do you want to know? Give me like for protective custody. What do you want? Like, I'll give it to you."
That's talking about silent panels. That scene where he's like, Dad, listen to me. Dad, don't hang up. And then it's just nothing. And it's just a really wide shot of him on a quiet, dark street. no dialogue. And it's just like the only light is on him in his little phone booth. And it's really sad. It's really funny. Just much like the FBI agents in the next few issues, I find it very funny that he's a piece of shit and looking for help.
Well, it's funny. So he turns himself in and he gives up. They want information to exchange protection for him. And so he won't give up his dad, but he gives them the fact that Matt Murdock is Daredevil. So they call the police commissioner, I guess, to middle of the night to give him this news.
No, I think it's FBI. These are FBI people.
Yeah, they're FBI people. But I don't, it's just their boss, but I don't know. Maybe he's a director.
Whoever he is, he's one of my favorite characters in the story arc because I just think Bendis does do a good job of the back and forth, as Alessandro mentioned, kind of like the fiction type dialogue. And when they tell him that Matt Murdock is Daredevil, he's in disbelief and they keep giving him more and more evidence. And he's like, what? He's like, his girlfriend was Elektra. She died on his front steps. He works for Wilson Fit. Like I just really enjoyed the comedic beats in this issue.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
Well, I like how the whole time they're telling him this, he's just sitting there doodling on a portrait of Matt Murdock and drawing on the Daredevil costume.
Yeah, it was. I really loved everything about this issue.
So again, this issue's cover, Daily Globe with Matt Murdock's picture, and then the DD's drawn around, and the outline of Daredevil is drawn around that. Fucking like that stood out to me in a comic book store. Like I was just like, holy shit, that looks amazing.
Do those Ds look drawn to you, Joe?
I think they were drawn by some sort of FBI director, not an artist. You know what I mean? Somebody with a marker or something, like a fucking idiot, like a little baby that doesn't know how to draw.
Oh yeah. Where's Matt Murdock's file? And they're like, Shield has it. He's like, Shield has his file.
yeah. That one's good. They go down the list of like what's going on.
I also like the director's immediate response was just like, okay, put it away, forget about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other guys are like, what do you mean? We got to go. And he's just like, if S.H.I.E.L.D. has this file, like, just forget it. He's Daredevil. Like, who cares? Move on.
So the FBI director tells them not to reveal this information, stays in the room. Next issue starts. We realize when the FBI agent is just, really down on his luck and his girlfriend or something doesn't keep making.
Or wife clearly doesn't trust him because he was at work. And then she's like, I'm supposed to believe that? And he's like, yeah. I was at the FBI headquarters.
I did think the use of the exclamation points in that dialogue was weird because she's like, I have to go to work. 15 minutes? Are you crazy? Anyway, so he sits outside of Matt Murdock's office, and Black Widow is, I guess, the worst fucking spy of all time because in broad daylight, she, with her long flowing red hair, does a bunch of backflips.
You know what's funny? Because this whole, like, one of the things Foggy and we were kind of joking about earlier is that, like, so many people know who Daredevil is, and, like, it could have been any one of those people or blah, 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 or, like, kind of thing. And it's like, or just one of his friends stopping by to hang out, and they're idiots and just walk in his front door dressed as superheroes.
I do want to, before we go to that, I want to go back to Maleev's art for a second, because we talked about the gritty stuff of it, but he puts stuff, it looks like shit splatter, like on the ceiling. It just looks like diarrhea poop splatter on the drop ceiling of the FBI.
It's projectile vomit. Oh.
I don't know. I think that stuff's funny. I guess it's supposed to be gritty, but it just looks like actual crap stained over.
It just looks like actual shit.
Yeah, I started going to the issue where the FBI agents on a stakeout at Murdock's, it's either his apartment or the office, he sees Black Widow Natasha do a bunch of backflips with her long red flowing hair. He knows something, and then he sees a storyline showing that Daredevil and Black Widow took down a criminal. So he kind of does his own verification. Once he realizes that it's true, he sells the story to the Daily Globe, and so Matt Murdock is outed as Daredevil. And the next issue picks up with Matt waking up in bed, and he kind of slowly can hear the rumblings on the street. And before he gets into bed, he already realizes that he's pretty much fucked. But issue 33 ends with Daredevil feeling like he needs to go on patrol, and Foggy saying that'd be a really stupid thing to do, and then Daredevil telling Foggy to kind of fuck off, and he goes and he does it anyways.
It's also the part where Foggy doesn't give him shit for how many people know his identity, and he's like, thanks. True.
And again, Foggy's being very practical. He's like, hey man, you're a fucking lawyer, and if it gets out that you're Daredevil, everything you did is going to be for nothing, because all of those people that were convicted are going to be freed, and also,
they're all gonna get out.
So how about you just like take one night off where you don't fucking prance around the streets in a devil costume?
But then why would the fact that he's Daredevil have any effect on the legal rulings? Like, it wouldn't. He still passed the bar and is a practicing lawyer in the state of New York, right?
Yeah, but I think he also prosecuted the same people he like forcefully beat.
Yeah, it would be like Daredevil gets evidence and then also hands it over to the police or something, and then also Matt Murdock's in court the next day.
That's a huge conflict of interest. He shouldn't do that.
Yeah, he's done it a lot of times.
Oh, that's not a. Oh,
and the one thing that Foggy says that actually rings true, or like the most obvious one, is like there was an actual issue where Daredevil was on trial, and Matt, I think he had Spider-Man do it. Someone posed as Daredevil and was Daredevil like on the stands while Matt Murdock, the lawyer, was like in court.
That's fun.
That got Daredevil like off of a crime or something, like somehow got Daredevil like out of trouble somehow. And obviously that's like defrauding the federal government.
I just thought Matt was trying things independently, but if he's trying people that Daredevil caught, like, he should be disbarred yesterday. Yeah. That is not ethical behavior.
Oh yeah, he does a lot of shady shit.
My favorite thing about reading this in this format, not digitally by the way, was this issue 33 ends with like Foggy being like, it's time to retire, and then like the next page is the cover of him pulling on the costume. And that just made me laugh. That's all. It's time to retire. Yeah, okay. Pull on my suit. Let's go. All right, chapter 34. We get chapter 34. Episode 34. We get an interesting J. Jonah Jameson.
Yeah, that was the what we alluded to earlier with that discussion between Jameson's yelling at his reporter. Why didn't anybody say?
Yeah.
Like, we get this.
How the fuck did we get scooped by the Daily Globe? Yeah.
So yeah, Jameson wants to like go full deep dive. He wants all his best reporters to go after Matt Murdock. And Ben Urich is sitting there in silence, and he finally says, Matt Murdock is not Daredevil. I know who Daredevil is. I'm not going to tell you who Daredevil is because Daredevil gives me stories, which helps the paper. It is a very calculated, manipulative move on Ben Urich's side. He is a very, very cool character. And I think that's something to be said about this run. Bendis does take these relatively ordinary characters and make them as interesting and as, quote unquote, powerful as Daredevil.
Yeah. I don't remember the last time I read a Batman comic where I was as interested in Bruce Wayne's life as I was in Batman's life. You know what I mean? Like, this really does that in a very strong way, even with these side characters that are quote unquote less important. Also, Peter Parker pops in.
Spider-Man side, we get Peter Parker.
I think it's cute that they don't know that each other knows, and that Peter came down to do the same thing that Ben was doing and kind of saw that he was doing it right when he came in to do it. It was pretty funny. It was pretty, like, kind of just like a nice little, I don't know, just they're both honorable people. They're both Peter's immediate concern is that J. Jonah Jameson is going to run with this like a dickhead. So he goes down, not even working there anymore, goes down there to be like, hey, don't do this. And then he finds Ben Urich doing it already.
Yeah, and then the rest of the issue is just Daredevil like angstily running around rooftops and screaming in the rain.
Yeah, he's clearly having a psychotic break. And it ends with him, that issue ends with him jumping on a light post, and he's above a bunch of people. And
all the reporters outside of his house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the last page of this comic because, like, the way he straddles that light pole is weird to me. Does that look like a comfortable way to grip? Like,
They
if
do.
you think about like
They do that with him a lot. I
kind of
think they have him like
COVID.
caressing things a lot and like straddling things in weird ways. And I think part of it is like a quote unquote like devil or a demon like kind of grasping onto something. Like they're trying to make him look like scary in a way that makes his costume make sense, sort of. But when you look at it from the idea that he's just a dude, it's silly and it looks weird.
Like, imagine a dude in tights gripping a light pole that way and looking at you.
But the way it's drawn, it is, I mean, it is, to Joe's point, it's like almost biblical, like demonic looking. It's not.
Yeah, it's like a Renaissance painting of a demon or something.
Yeah. The way he's crouching down on it and grabbing it, and his right leg is like up into his armpit and his left leg is hanging down. He almost looks like a gargoyle or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess my point is artistically it's purposeful, but you're right, it's ridiculous.
No, right. I mean, I get all that point, but I just, going back to like that bullseye comment, just imagine like you look up and there's a dude in tights.
It would be scary. It'd be scary.
On a pole like that looking down at you. It'd be strange. You'd think that is a strange man up there.
No, I'd be horrified. Dude, if I actually saw a fucking that shape up on a lamppost, that'd be fucking scary.
Okay, but imagine it was 2 p.m. on a sunny day.
All right, but it's not. It's like 3 in the morning at night.
Strange human being.
It's like 3 in the morning in the middle of the night. It's horrifying.
All right, next
issue 35.
Crossover. Actually, so I wanted to make one comment on this issue because it's sort of ironic because another big Bendis run is Ultimate Spider-Man. I thought Spider-Man was written terribly in this issue. Like his jokes weren't funny. It was just kind of like mailed in, uninteresting, pithy dialogue. And I just thought it was weird because Bendis is like famous for writing Spider-Man.
See, I've always enjoyed the way Bendis writes Spider-Man. I've always enjoyed how much he plays into like the comedic beats with him. He is, I mean, I'm not sure how old Spider-Man is supposed to be at this point. He does still come off as kind of a teenager. But I kind of had the exact opposite reaction where the fact that Daredevil is just so serious and so heavy and so angry, having the levity of Spider-Man in this issue was kind of nice.
Yeah, I agree. I like when he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, was that a rhetorical question? Can you spell rhetorical?" Like that was funny. That made me laugh.
I didn't think it was fun. I mean, I don't mind the levity as an idea, but I didn't think any of the jokes were that funny or landed. They were just kind of bad. I don't know. It didn't work for me.
Maybe it's because it's a 35-year-old man talking like a teenager, and you're like, this doesn't feel right.
I like that point too, because when Spider-Man was like, "Hey, do you want to get out of here?" and Daredevil was like, "Do not pick me up."
Yeah,
like,
I can do this by myself. Back to your point though about him being over the reporters and stuff. Like he basically takes his mask off, and he's again spent an entire issue running through the rain over the rooftops crying. And
it looks like he's about to take his mask off and say, "Look at me, I'm not afraid." But then he doesn't because he of course is a coward.
Well, he's having,
or as he says, idiot. But yeah, you can see it as cowardly.
He's a coward. His whole legal career was based on illegally obtaining evidence as Daredevil to put away criminals he caught as Daredevil.
He also manipulates the jury by knowing what to say to persuade them by listening to all their heartbeats.
I gotta say, as we talked about it, I'm really coming down on that. I mean, I think he's behaved in a very unethical manner, and I don't think.
Remember in the beginning of this discussion when I said, "Hey, do you feel like Daredevil's kind of a piece of shit by the end of this?" And you guys were both like, "No," and now I was like, "I get it."
Definitely. Well, I disagree. So Daredevil, I think is okay. Matt.
Oh yeah, well yeah. Oh wait, they're the same person.
He should be in jail. But the Daredevil hero is fun.
He definitely is in the gray area when it comes to morals, but I think that's why he's so interesting. I mean, he's brutal too, and he has an inner monologue himself. He's like, "I just want to beat the shit out of someone right now. That's all I want to do. I want to." He's overtly brutal more so than probably like Spider-Man has super strength. He's constantly holding back to make sure he doesn't hurt who he's fighting. Daredevil just goes all out, and sometimes it'll just be on a regular like mob guy with no powers or anything, and he beats him into a pulp when you know, the guy probably passed out after the first punch and he hits him like 25 more times in the face.
Yeah, but that came out in the I don't know if you all watched all seasons of the Netflix series, but they leaned to that part a lot. Like especially in season 3, I think there's a point where he just goes out just to beat the shit out of people.
Well,
Because
it's
he's
kind of like
frustrated.
he's very Catholic, and it's that weird, like,
It's a lot of guilt, Patrick. A lot of guilt.
I think Bendis actually does like not so much in this storyline, but a lot. He does a pretty good job of leaning into the Catholic part of his character.
It's very like divine justice in his head almost. I think that's how he's kind of able to justify all the shady stuff he does, because the ends justify the means in his head. And I think he kind of uses the Catholic Church as this weird crutch of this, you know.
He literally almost says to Foggy, "This is my cross to bear," and he's like, "No, I'm gonna help you this time, you fucking piece of shit," kind of thing. Well, I love this real quick thing in the diner where the guy's like, "Hey, Daredevil, what the color is my shirt?" And then like he leaves and he's like, the girlfriend's like, "He didn't answer."
Yeah,
that's kind of clever. That's a clever Bendis line right there. You know, like it's the one thing Daredevil wouldn't be able to do. He wouldn't be like, "You're sitting over there and holding a fork." Like he's like, "What color is my shirt?" He's like, "Shit."
It's weird. That whole beat always stuck with me from the first time I read it, because it is very clever. But then when he says, what color is my shirt? He says it from Daredevil. He's like over Daredevil's shoulder. And then Daredevil dramatically turns around and looks like he's looking directly at the guy's shirt, but I guess he's listening to something outside.
Yeah.
Then he just runs away.
Well, he's hearing the boom of Mr. Hyde smashing a van into the side of his building, brownstone. And then we get Spider-Man, and that's when Al checks out because Spider-Man's not funny. And I check out a little bit because Spider-Man looks a little silly with Maleev's art style. And then
again, I don't really care for Foggy's character, but again, I get why he's so mad at Matt, because Foggy is at Matt Murdock's apartment, attacked by a supervillain. He's inside, could have easily died. Daredevil and Spider-Man show up, defeat said supervillain, and then instead of going to check to make sure Foggy's okay, Daredevil just swings off into the distance with Spider-Man. And if I was Foggy, I'd be like, dude, what the fuck? You didn't also, like, everyone's asking if you're here, you need to come back inside to like make it seem like, you know, you're not fucking Daredevil who's outside.
Yeah. And also Foggy, maybe don't sit in the window with a bunch of reporters outside.
Also that too, yeah.
Just maybe.
First of all,
but yeah, I get your point.
Should also be disbarred in the state of New York because he
absolutely
in everything Matt Murdock.
100%
unethical and illegal.
100%.
So screw Foggy. That's all I wanted to say.
What's this conversation with Ben and Daredevil, or is it anything? Oh, he's saying, "I'm going to make some changes in my 26 days later." That's a big jump, by the way.
Well, he left the country. It's implied he left the country to do something. Maybe
he left the country and went to Japan. I don't remember.
Yeah, maybe there was some crossover comic or something where he was in Japan.
I think they do explore that in a later arc, if I'm not mistaken. They go into like what he was doing while he was there. At any rate, he's talking to Ben about streamlining his life, and for some reason, Foggy is still involved in it.
And then he has a big press conference. He's got a big presser.
Yeah, and you really don't know if he's gonna come clean and say I am Daredevil or not. It's pretty, you know, in terms of this story arc at the time, I was 50-50 whether he was gonna admit he was Daredevil or not. He took a month to think about it, for God's sakes, you know?
And he decided to lie. He just decided to bold-facedly lie to the American public.
To protect people, Al.
Who's he protecting? Everybody he cared about's already dead. Who's it? Foggy. Foggy's the only person left to protect.
Also, he has Luke Cage as a bodyguard. He comes in kind of out of nowhere. Black Widow.
At the time, he was literally Heroes for Hire. Like that comic was a thing.
Gotcha. Yeah, and Black Widow just strip teases in front of him to get into her Black Widow costume.
Does it? I feel like she does it.
And look at, all right, going back to that idea of seeing this in real life, if you saw a woman standing like this in real life, what would your reaction be? That's not how a real person
Yeah, no, it's
Hands.
unless she was joking. I don't enjoy anything about Natasha's role in this story arc.
I mean, she is coming to him as an ex-girlfriend. They are intimate together. It's not like it's just a friend of his that's standing like that seductively. It's someone
That's not
he's
seductive.
had
That's
sex with.
seductive. It's just a bizarre way to stand.
I think, well, I mean, it's whatever. It's whatever you want to call it. It's flirty. Like the way she's standing is like, hey, come hang out with me. I'm wearing skin tight clothing, and he's like, put your clothes back on, Natasha, kind of thing. But it's like, again, it's not like it's just a friend and she's acting strangely. They have had intercourse together.
Anyway, another typical non-sexualized strong female character for Brian Michael Bendis.
I'm with Al on this one. That whole
I agree. It's
just like half the bones in her.
Well,
body.
Also, it's like, how much did Bendis say? Make sure you have her ass bend down towards the camera as she takes her pants off.
I guess
or is that Alex Maleev? I don't know.
My point is that Natasha is a super spy. She's probably been trained very specifically in the art of seduction, and that pose is just not a very seductive move. It's like the nerdy.
Maybe it's her trying to turn that off. I mean, like, we're just friends, and she doesn't know how to do it. Like, she's kind of like trying to put her elbow up, or like, it's like an awkward like, come hang out.
Anyway, so she's there to try to get Matt to put on the costume and go hunt crime with her, but she fails to seduce him into being Daredevil because he's in the mode of, I'm just going to be Matt for a while. And then she argues with Foggy over dumb shit. Nobody cares about either of their characters. And then we got a big dinner with Vanessa. Yeah. Matt and Vanessa.
So again, very complicated relationship with Matt Murdock and the Fisk family. Not really sure why he meets with Vanessa.
He meets with her because of the note that she gives him.
Right.
So she's giving him something.
Again, the dynamics of the relationship are so interesting because I don't even understand why she felt compelled to give that to him. And then he throws a real jab at her with the comment about her son. What does he say here?
I think that's his way of being like, fuck you, you're still my enemy, and here's a little
yeah, it was weird,
shiv in your side kind of feeling.
Here's a gift, and he goes, my condolences on the death of your son Richard, and then it's a silent panel of her, and he goes, they say losing a child is the harshest tragedy, and then it's a large panel of them sitting at this dark dinner table with the candles burning in between them. And it looks like she's just like giving him a death stare.
Yeah. And is that, does anybody know anything about art history? Like, is that an actual painting that is famous?
It is an actual painting. Should I know what it is? Yes. Do I? No.
Because it might, depending on what that painting is, it might have some sort of symbolic meaning.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. So I kind of have this, my takeaway from this conversation is she's offering him this in the sense of like that old school mafia, like honor among thieves thing where like, hey, this wipes our slate clean. I didn't have anything to do with this. Here's the guy that killed your brother kind of thing. And then he's taking it and going, cool, thanks. Also, I'm a good guy and heard you killed your son. You're a piece of shit. And I know you're a piece of shit. And one day I'll get you. Like, again, like I still go back to that. Yeah, they have this thing where they sort of like, quote unquote, respect each other. But I feel like he's definitely more along the lines of like, if I could, I would take you down. I just can't. And stop treating me like one of your fucking mafia friends, kind of thing.
The thing that fascinates me about this scene is they're in like the second course of a fancy meal. So around this 30-second snippet we see are probably like 2 hours of them having a meal together. And I just think that's hilarious. Like, what were they talking about before and after this?
Just what's going on with Foggy and like what's
I wonder what's
going on with his life.
Like fall, what's going on? New fall styles. What's going on?
Remember that time when Wilson almost killed me? That was fun.
I mean,
this is a good day. So remember he used to wear purple pants with the pinstripes? That was weird, right? It's a weird style choice.
I mean, they must have had like an hour and a half before this, and then another half hour after this of dessert and after dinner drinks.
She's like, do you remember when you used to wear that yellow costume? I wasn't a fan of that.
Yeah, that was unfortunate. Why the yellow devil?
Made no sense. So yeah,
I did like the all black. I thought that was classy.
Yeah, it's all black is always classy. So he finishes dinner with Vanessa, and he's going home, and he's triggered because he smells Elektra. Again, they really go with the smelling. And it's the one thing, because he'd already denied Natasha, Black Widow. He said he hung up the suit. He wasn't doing the adventure stuff anymore. So Elektra is the one person that can get him to risk being exposed as Daredevil. But yeah, so Elektra shows up at the very end of that issue. Yeah, I love the way she is drawn in this. I love the very long wisps of the red, like, tassels. I don't even think it's almost, I don't know, it kind of just conveys movement more so than I think that her costumes really got such long.
Yeah, that's exactly what that's supposed to be. Yeah.
It's just all very well done.
Yeah, she looks fucking badass here. And I don't feel like it was overly sexualized like the Black Widow scene. I think this is just what Elektra wears.
And also,
I don't feel like it was overly done in a,
I love getting Matt's POV of this interaction, because he clearly has feelings for her still, and he can talk about not hearing her heart skip a beat and how she's very calm. He says that her breathing is so controlled she could be dead. It's just all these really cool things that he thinks that makes the reader realize like how badass Elektra is. And they had a little quick chit chat. My favorite takeaway from it, though, is that he pretty much tells Elektra that he wishes they never broke up and when they were in college, whenever they dated, and how her heart rate did not change. It was clear she does not feel anything for Matt anymore, and she just dips out and leaves him there on the roof.
So but the thing that I think like that this story arc sets up, and like I remember reading this arc at the time and being like, that was fucking amazing. Where the fuck do you go from here? And like the next arc just takes Daredevil and you'd think he's at rock bottom, and they just keep fucking digging holes and he keeps going further down, and it's fucking crazy. And I would love to look at the next arc with you guys on this at some later point. But the point is, I think the focus of this conversation is Foggy's whole cycle of violence idea and him stopping being Daredevil. And her basically saying, like, if you didn't stab somebody, then you didn't kill them, period. Like, it doesn't matter if Foggy dies. It doesn't matter if I died. It didn't matter if Karen died. Like, it's not your fault. And you just need to keep being Daredevil because it's the right thing to do. And people die around you. That's going to happen, and like, but it doesn't mean you're responsible for it, kind of thing.
Yeah, she says.
Because she's kind of like, we're in a cycle of violence. And he's like, yeah, we are. But that's not you. That's just what's going on, like, kind of. And I was like, oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, she says the only death you can take responsibility for is the one that you commit with your own hand. So yeah, it does get through the entire struggle he was having with the collateral damage. Her saying that, that's not really on you. You're
and I think, and again, so we find out that the reason that Elektra is here is because of Natasha, like, reached out to her. So it's kind of like, so it's two ex-girlfriends fucking with him, but at the same time, it's like Natasha did it because she thought that it would get him to do what he needed to be doing, which is being Daredevil. And she wasn't wrong, because after this conversation with Elektra for 5 seconds, he's like, fuck, she's right. And I just need to keep being Daredevil no matter what the collateral damage is. Then we get this end bit with him being a lawyer again, and he's a piece of shit, guys.
Well, he's going to sue. So he's suing the Daily Globe over the Daredevil story.
Which is true.
Yeah, but he's suing them for libel or whatever. And then
which is false.
And then he gets into an argument with the sort of Rupert Murdoch stand-in Daily Globe owner. And
which that whole beat by beat was pretty interesting, because they're negotiating and Matt agrees to settle. And he gets up and he starts using his walking stick because he's blind. And the Rupert Murdoch character is pretty convinced he is Daredevil. And there's something about the tapping of the stick, knowing that he doesn't need it, that like triggers him. And he says, fuck it, deals off, and basically says that you settled for the exact amount I was willing to settle for, kind of implying that he knows he's Daredevil.
Yeah, you knew. Well, no, he knew. Like he knows that he knows that that's the amount he would have settled for somehow.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's like, fuck you, we're coming for you. So again, this run does a very good job. Everything he does in the costume as Daredevil is interesting, but all the subterfuge and machinations going on with these different characters with him. I mean, they dragged this on for a long time. Him being
it keeps going
with the public not knowing if he's Daredevil or if he's not. And they do a really good job of making it believable that it would take this long for people to figure it out.
Real quick, the reason that they're sitting down at all is because he intimidated their witness, which was the FBI guy. And I just loved that the only thing he did to him at all was just standing on his fire escape. And then he was gone, and that was it. And the guy was like, how do you know it was me? How do you know? And then that was it, and then he's gone. And I was like, that was fucking amazing. Just stand there and looks at him.
Speaking to Daredevil's kind of like the ends justify the means, Vanessa got that information by murdering a bunch of people. He used that information for his own benefit. It is kind of like he does a lot of shady stuff. Like I feel like, not that Superman would need that, but a more moral, upstanding superhero would not take evidence that was clearly received through violence. I don't know.
He does more of that in, I know we're not going it over here, but just to mention it real quick, the next mini arc is regarding the trial of White Tiger, who was falsely accused of murdering a policeman and stealing a TV. But that kind of goes into that because he, as Matt Murdock, is defending this person. But then at night, he'll become Daredevil and try to find out who actually did it and beat people up and intimidate them into giving the right testimony that he wants so that his client.
Guys, the system's corrupt. He's doing the right thing.
I know, it's pretty fucked up. It's pretty. Well, that one mini arc is pretty good about White Tiger because I think it's kind of interesting because as like a TLDR version, he's falsely accused of doing a bad thing, but then he reacts in a criminal way after having been falsely convicted. The White Tiger person. So it was kind of a cool storyline of sort of like realistic is the wrong word, but I appreciated how it's kind of like the situation just got messy. And it was kind of interesting how it didn't have a traditional setup, plot line, and then neat resolution, and the good guys got off and the bad guys paid.
Yeah.
It just the way it actually worked out was just messy. And a person who was innocent got convicted, but then did other bad things, and then things just kind of fell apart. And it was sort of an interesting progression of that. So I did like that kind of mini arc with.
So this arc kind of wraps up with just him saving a little girl, but the point of the scene is that it shows people on the street witnessing him save people, and then a bunch of the reactions are just the important takeaways, and it's I get he jumps onto a van and then jumps onto a light post and then jumps onto a building, and they're like, no fucking way, that guy's blind, and shit like that. And then somebody's like, we should arrest him, and then somebody else is like, yeah, but he does so much good. Who cares a fuck if it's the lawyer, kind of thing. And then it's just little, and he's like, I don't care, he saved my cousin. It's just little stuff like that. And it's that these little kind of takeaways that he kind of hits you with right at the end of the arc is what the next few arcs are all about. As Patty was saying, this continues on through this book. It doesn't stop here. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Well, this arc sort of set up the next couple of years of Daredevil.
And that kind of contrasting, I guess, appreciation of what he does is throughout the arc. Even we've talked about it before, the two cops, one of whom is let's shoot him and bring him in, and the other one's no, we need him to do what he does. FBI agents, the director says, look, this guy's with S.H.I.E.L.D., he fights crime, forget about it. And the other FBI agents were well, let's bring him in. We keep getting a lot of that kind of contrasting view of some people are okay with vigilantes doing what they do and appreciate it. and other people are not.
Patty, what's your overall take at the end?
I enjoyed this as much as I did the first time I read it. I think it does hold up. I love the artwork. I love the pacing of the story. Again, I think it speaks volumes that you have made Matt Murdock and his life as a lawyer and his personal relationships as interesting as everything Daredevil's doing.
Yeah. Or at the very least, intertwine them.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely what this entire story arc is about. And it's kind of interesting because we just came off of Identity Crisis about how important secret identities are right into this storyline.
Hey, that is funny.
I mean, Daredevil should mind white people into forgetting who he is.
I mean, obviously, why doesn't he just talk to Zatanna?
Honestly, if he could, he definitely would.
He definitely would. He would have voted yes in a heartbeat. This portion of time where Bendis was like kind of just entering into mainstream comics, basically, but like there was still a lot of like raw Bendis in this, and like a lot of talking head, and there was a lot of like dialogue, and that hasn't really gone away 100%, but he definitely doesn't write the same way anymore. But like this is like classic Bendis. I don't know if I love it still. It's sort of distracting and annoying at times, not all the time, but like that would be my only negative takeaway at all. It's just like these little like, I don't know, 8,000 word bubbles on a page of like everyone in the crowd talking at the same time. You're like, I get it. There's a crowd there, you know, like kind of thing. Like, I don't necessarily need that. I get it. Like what it did at the time made sense, but like going back, it's like, well, it's kind of pointless. But yeah, overall, fantastic. I fucking love this arc. It got me reading Daredevil in the first fucking place. Al?
Yeah, I also liked it. Definitely great. I would recommend, I mean, if you read it, definitely read beyond this and do the whole Bendis arc. And
we might come back to this at some point. But
one thing that was interesting reading this compared to a lot of the other stuff we've done, like Identity Crisis, Mr. Miracle, are these really contained, limited runs that aren't like mainstream comics. And this was kind of a big contrast because it really did feel like you're jumping in
this is definitely like the opening of a door into an overall story.
I mean, this did feel like we're starting on issue 26. Like there was stuff going on before and there's stuff going on after. Like, ongoing.
Yeah, not even considering where we jumped on, but there's definitely more after this. Yeah, for sure.
But I mean, for whoever, if you're going to read this now and haven't read it already, definitely do the whole Bendis run because, I mean, it's really great. And it goes into really dark but cool places.
At least read up to issue 50 because I think that might be my favorite issue of his entire run. I mean, the run does go in places that I did not think it would go. And as Joe mentioned earlier, it's kind of like, you know, it's kind of like a similar parallel to Strange Adventures with Adam Strange, how it's like he started off as a good guy and shit keeps happening. He keeps kind of
every 12 issues you think it's gonna get that's it, and then that's as low as he can go, and then like the next 12 issue arc, like Bendis takes him lower. It's like crazy, and I'm like, how the fuck? Where are you going from here?
It's the point where it becomes very difficult to tell the difference between, you know, Daredevil.
On that note, we should definitely come back, revisit some Daredevil in a later time. Like obviously, like we could do the next volume and just, you know, once a year we'll just hit some Daredevil. Ooh.
Yeah, because I mean, we get to the point where like he just full on replaces the villain he's fought against. Like, I mean, it gets really on the nose of like.
I don't know how far into that it is, but like when he spoilers, everybody, he declares himself the Kingpin of New York. It's pretty awesome. Anyway,
issue 50, and he takes his mask off in front of everyone, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm fucking Daredevil, and I fucking own you, and if any of y'all fucking kill you." And after that happens, there's a short little side story that the Punisher, I think, was in the area and heard Matt announce being the Kingpin, and Punisher's like, "I gotta kill you now, man." And Daredevil just beats the shit out of Frank Castle. Like, it's not even remotely close.
That sounds amazing. Anyway, that's been Mobius Couch for this week, and that was Daredevil 26 through 37 of Bendis' run, which is the beginning of his run. And I've been Joe, and you've been listening to Patty.
Bye, Al.
And Al.
Bye, everybody. Don't read Frank Miller.
or look at anything David Mack has done, apparently.
Unless it's a framed picture above your gaming PC.
It's not above the gaming PC. It's on the wall in my office.
David Mack, if you're listening, me and Patty love you, and I think you do great work.